Hello everyone, this is Jason Gong. I'm first year PhD student at Department of Communication at UC Davis. Here I'm introducing my master project on media multitasking. And here we are introducing this novel model about exploration-exploitation model for media multitasking. Media multitasking has becoming a very common phenomenon for younger generations for people's media behaviors. Our research question is why people media multitask. There are several previous explanations for that. The first is we call motivation approach. This approach uses and gratification theory. This theory basically suggests that people have basic needs, and to satisfy those needs and to obtain the gratification, people do media multitask. Another approach is we call cognitive control approach. This approach basically suggests that high media multitaskers, they have low cognitive control, so they cannot depress their impulsivity to media multitask. The empirical evidence to support this argument is that there are negative correlation between cognitive control and the media multitasking capacity. We also find it pretty interesting that their argument about exploratory attention versus exploitative attention might be the driving mechanism for media multitasking. Here we are suggesting this possible alternative explanation for media multitasking, which we call as decision-making approach. And this decision-making approach assumes that people's media selection are a value-based decision-making. There are empirical evidence support that. First, media choices is determined by evaluation of reward and the cost of the tasks, and high media multitaskers is associated with high impulsivity and sensation seeking. Also, high media multitaskers is associated with high boredom proneness trait. Then our question becomes, is media multitasking intrinsically rewarding? We obtain some insight from neuroscience about intrinsic motivation. One line of studies about intrinsic motivation suggests that the balance between effort and ability induce intrinsic motivation, and the synchronization of reward and cognitive control induce the state of flow, which induce the intrinsic motivation. And also, the intrinsic motivation for information seeking suggests that the curiosity and novelty seeking, the uncertainty reduction, and the learning motivation could motivate people for the intrinsic value of the information seeking. Then our hypothesis is projecting the behavior dilemma between media single tasking versus media multitasking onto the decision dilemma between extrinsic value versus intrinsic value, and the decision dilemma between exploitation and exploration. Our hypothesis is suggesting whether or not there is a correlation between these dilemmas. If we can show that there is correlation, then we might be able to say, okay, the behavior media single tasking and media multitasking might be driven by the decision dilemma between exploitation, exploration, and extrinsic value versus intrinsic value. To explain a little bit more about exploration versus exploitation, we can introduce an example for going to a restaurant. Let's say you and the menu of the restaurant is that you are not fully uncertain. That part of the dish is that you are familiar with, part of the dish that you have never tried before. And what's the best approach for your lunch? The first approach is to choose the always known as the best. The next approach is always try the novel dish. Then the first approach is considered as exploitation because you are exploiting your existing knowledge to choose the most rational decision, the most highest valuable decision. The next approach is considered as exploration because it's an exploratory behavior that you are accessing information rather than the value, the direct extrinsic value of the dish. Then computer scientists first introduce this trade-off, then cognitive neuroscientists thinks that we human as a decision makers also have the mechanism of the decision making dilemma between exploration and exploitation. The reason for that is the assumption also applies for humans that our decision environment is super uncertain. We do not know before we try it of the value associated with each option. And the cognitive neuroscientists, they design this multiple arm bandit task, and it's basically a gambling task that it presents different gambling machines to the participant and categorize people's decision between exploration versus exploitation, and to study the pattern and also the neuronal correlates with different types of decisions. Here we think that people's media selection is also between exploration and exploitation, because we as a media user are not fully uncertain about the media. We are not sure the next message before we check the social media. We are not sure about next movie before we actually watch the movie, and we are not exactly sure about next paper before we have read the paper. So the decisions between different media tasks is not just comparing the extrinsic value of the tasks, but also a decision dilemma between the extrinsic value of the task and the intrinsic value of the task, the novelty of the task. Then this novelty, this intrinsic value drives people's medium switching and multitasking behavior. That's our basic hypothesis. We designed this pick-a-dot task, which is adoption from previous task, which is called 4-arm bandit task. And this task have multiple gambling machines, and each gambling machine is associated with a payoff function that is a decaying random walk function, as you can see here. So each line is associated with each gambling machine, and the participant need to obtain as much payoff as possible in these 300 trials. The method, we recruit undergraduate students and we measure their media multitasking, we measure their exploration-exploitation decision tendency, and we measure their trade-off curiosity. And the results show that high media multitaskers make more exploration choices, and this support our exploration-exploitation model of media multitasking. The second hypothesis is not supported, that high media multitaskers does not have higher curiosity scores. It is not significant. Our conclusion is that this empirical test supported the exploration-exploitation model of media multitasking, but it does not support the curiosity hypothesis that high media multitasking and exploration might be activated by curiosity. For the future, we highly promote the decision-making series on media selections. We think it is super beneficial for media researchers. And second, we think combined with neuronal data, we can better reveal the decision mechanism for media multitasking. Also, we think a controlled experiment might be necessary for further testing the model, the exploration-exploitation model of media multitasking. I would like to thank you for your attention, and also would like to thank you for Dr. Brittany Duff, my advisor at UIUC in my master's. I really appreciate your help and encouragement and support in my master academic life. I really appreciate that. And if you are interested in the experiment, the code for the experiment is publicly available in GitHub. Thank you very much.